In the previous sessions, which we have discussed in the MM part of view, as a uh, enterprise structure and as well as the material master, we have discussed about of enterprise structure of the MM point of view and as well as material master and as well as the vendor master, which we have discussed about of these are the things which we have already done these three things, but not completely, but basically something. That means basic material master and as well as basic material master, how it will be going. We have created all these things, and including with this, whenever we have done with the master data, I want to make some question here. Actually, I'm trying to question from yours. What that is? Okay, Mister. Till now, the client is not in SAP. Whatever the client is asking about of the requirements, as per that which we have done the material master, and even as per that which we have created the vendor master. Is it fine? Even
Yes.
in sometimes whatever the client is asking about of the fees regarding about of the material or the vendor. So in the previous session which you have asked, sir, I want to know about of the basic views of the material master. Is it right? You are asking about of the basic views of the material master. In that
The material
situation,
types for
yeah, material types of the basic views. At that time I said that we will discuss about of in the future class, Mr. Kushan, and we will escape this one. But not escape, let's discuss about of this one. That means if the client is already having some of the data with the previous edition. That means uh, something around. If the client is having the material like this, they are requiring about the not the material. Let's take the vendor. The client is asking to maintain the vendor number and even the vendor name and vendor city and vendor country or something. But this is the SAP predefined. The SAP is also having these fields. That's why it will be possible to maintain all these fields whether it is required for the client or not. But now the client is asking that I don't want to use the vendor number. I want to maintain the supplier ID. That means the client is asking that they want to maintain the vendor instead of the vendor number. They want to give the supplier ID. Supplier ID. Supplier ID. Or else in the same way, instead of the
No.
instead of the vendor name, they want to maintain as a name consigner name. Consigner name. And as well as instead of the city, they wants to maintain the land, and even they wants to maintain the country. That was a common. As like as if the client is asking about of the a multiple of the fields for the vendor master, but that will not matching up with the SAP existing one. That means the client is asking some X, but that some X is not available in SAP, then what will be happen? Or else what we need to do in the situation? If the client is asking some X, if it is there in SAP, we will make as a customization of this one. But here the problem is, whatever the client is asking, which is not available in SAP, that means, which we can say that there was a gap has been generated. And the gap has to be fulfilled by the consultant level, being as a certified consultant or else being as a senior consultant or something whatever, then what we have to do? That means simply we can say that the client is asking some X. Client is asking some XYZ, and the SAP is consist of some ABC. The client is asking about of some XYZ, but the SAP is consist of ABC. That means whatever the client is asking to maintain the details like this, but the SAP is having like this. That means, which simply we can say that whatever the client is asking, which is not in the SAP system, then what we have to do? That was the question here. So that means whatever the client is asking in the terminology which is called as an as is. Whatever the client requirement is as is, and they want to put into the SAP is called as a to be. That means whatever the client is asking in the as is document that will not matches with the to be of the SAP. Then what we have to do in the sense of in between of these two, there was a generation of a gap will be there. ZAP. What was a gap analysis in the sense of the client requirement will be there in SAP and we will make that in the customization of the functional consultant. But whatever the client is asking some X that will not in their SAP, it was not there in SAP. Then what we have to do that there was a gap has been generated and the gap has to be fulfilled by the our person, our consultant. Then what we have to do? Now, as which we said that, so let's see, in the SAP, already the vendor details or the vendor records has been maintained in the backend of the database table name, which it will be calling as an LFA1, the database table for the vendor master. The database table for the vendor master, it was an LFA1. LFA1. What it was? It was a vendor master. As like as which we have discussed another master also, which is called as an MARA. What is an MARA in the sense of it was a material master. That means the materials whatever we have created can be stored in the table of MARA, and as well as whatever the vendors which we have created, those of the vendor masters has been stored in the table of the LFA1. But here let me check it out by the table of LFA1 or MARA. Go for the transaction code of SE11. It will be called as a dictionary. It will be called as a dictionary. For opening of the tool of the dictionary, which we can have the transaction code of, we are having the transaction code of SE11. Let's see the SE11. When we are going to the SE11, what is the table name which you want to make it as? MARA, and make it display. There was a multiple of the fields will be showing here for whatever which we are having in the MARA table. See, in the MARA table, material number will be shown as an MATNR, division will be shown as an include, and created on date will be shown as an ERSDA, as like as LFA1 display. Here it will be showing the account number, country key, name 1, name 2, name 3 and everything. That means whatever we are creating in a MK01, for the creation of a vendor master, everything, each and every field will be comes into this database table. But now what the client is asking when creation of a vendor, I don't want these fields. I don't want these are the SAP predefined fields. I want my own fields. Instead of the vendor number, I need to maintain the vendor supplier number or supplier ID. Instead of the vendor name, I need to maintain the supplier code. In this situation, what we need to do that? We need to develop a new one of a table. A table is the combination of a number of records, a number of fields. and each and every field represents a number of records. As like as here the client is asking to maintain the fields of the supplier ID and the supplier name and the container name and the land and as well as the country and so on and so on. In this situation, just we are going for the SC11 here, SC11, and make the database table with the name of, it has to be starts with the ZRY. Just make it as a Z KP1 and then make the create. Now it asks me about the description. So what it was? Simply we can say that it was a vendor master data details. Whatever the table which we are going to create, the table name is ZKP1 and the table description is that was a vendor master data details. Under this vendor master data, what would be the delivery class? That means what are the records which you want to enter in the database table, and the table is either master or the transaction. For example, vendor details is called as master data. Vendor wise purchase orders is a transaction data. As like as whatever you are going to create now, is it a master or a transaction? Most probably it was in a master and transaction. Both of the things which I can use. And even when you have created some of the fields in the table or the records, even if you want to add some more fields also for the table in the future, is it can be allowed or not allowed? Which we can give the allowed. If it is a transaction data, it should not be changeable. That's why at that time we can give the not allowed. But if it is in a master data, it can be allowed. And now go for the fields, and in this fields, see first of all, what is the vendor table the client is asking, and which type of the table it was, and the changes has to be applicable or not, yes, and what would be the fields. So in this fields, what we need to give the details here. What are the details which we need to give here? So simple of process here. Let's see. What is the first table name? The table name is KP1. And now give the in the delivery maintenance, what is the table description and which type of the table it was, and the maintenance was allowed or not. And then go for the fields. If we can go for the fields, it asks me that what is the field name, as which we discussed, SUP underscore ID, supplier ID, and supplier ID has to be maintained in the primary key, and as well as, and then which type of the data. That means if the client is asking to maintain the vendor details, the vendor or supplier ID, it can be the combination of the characters and the numerics, the both. In generally, the LF11 table of vendor, that means SAP standard vendor creation table is MK01. The MK01 consists of the vendor number, but not in the characters, only in the numbers. But my client is asking to maintain the supplier ID with the characters. That is the combination of the characters or the numerics. Then what we have to do that, open it and make it char. And even in general here, the SAP standard one for creation of vendor, it was a vendor name cannot be more than the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16 and something. That means 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. The vendor number cannot be more than the 16. But here my client is asking to maintain the vendor ID or the supplier ID should not be more than the 8. Even it should not be more than the 18. That means they can make up to that much. And now here you can write simply supplier, supplier identification code, supplier identification code. And the next, it's asking about a supplier name N1, and it should be the character, and the supplier name is the client is asking to maintain up to the 36, and then make it as an supplier name, and as well as TDS code, supplier TDS code, TDS underscore code. TDS code cannot be in the characters, it should be in the numericals. For the numerics, it should be maintained with the NUMC. NUMC. And it should not be with more than the 18. What it was? TDS code of supplier. And even they want to know the contact number. The contact number should be comes with the numerical, and it should not be more than the 11. And what it was is contact number, contact number, contact number for the supplier. And now this is enough. That means in generally the SAP system consists of the for the vendor creation the fields of the vendor number, purchase organization, and the account group. Now let us see what is the purchase organization which we have created. Here it is MANG or MAN1 something which I have taken the MAN1, and we are going to create the vendor in the account group of MANR, raw material suppliers. Enter. Then what the fields is it is? Name, search term, house number, so on so on so. But here the client is asking about not the field. I want to maintain the supplier ID, supplier number, name, and supplier code, and as well as the contact number. The client is asking like this. Instead of using that, the client is asking to use this one. That's why we are creating this new field. And after completion of this one, go for technical settings. Yes. And the data class. Which type of the data it was? Whether it is the master or the transaction. It was in a master. And the size category for the vendor. That means how many records can be creatable in this table. The maximum of this much of the number of records. This much number of the records can be accessible into that particular database table. And just go for a save it. Now the DB was created here with the DB of vendor ID, that means supplier ID and the supplier name, and as well as the TDS code, and as well as the contact number. And now make it activate. Done. Make it activate. And after activating of this one, just make it as a save. Now, if you can check it out, the database table was created for the vendor. Okay, fine. As like as in the same way, the SAP system is already having the table of LFA1. The SAP system is already consists of table of LFA1, and it's having all these fields, but the client is not accepting these fields. The client is asking to maintain the fields like this. Like this. That's why we have created. Okay, fine. As per the client requirement, we have done this one. And after that, when creation of all these fields, there was a screen will be there, which is like this, MK01. There was a multiple of fields will be there. But as in the same way, if the table was created for that, I need to maintain the screen also as like as an MK01. That means, which we can call as a name, creation of a GUI screen. Creation of a GUI screen. For that, we need to go for the SC38, SC38, and here it is asking about the program. Here the program which I am giving as a KP2, and make it create, and here the title. Even if you can observe here, let's see, when we are using the MK01, it will be showing the creation of a vendor initial screen, as like as when I am creating the supplier. When I am creating the supplier, what is the name which I want to maintain for the screen? Here I am giving the screen with the name of supplier creation. Supplier creation. And the type of this program is can be the executable program. We are not writing any program. We are just creating a user-defined screen for the database table which the client is asking. For the database table which the client is asking. For here, just simply give the call screen and something 500. And just double click on this one. Yes. 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 And what it was, which we can simply call it as a supplier data screen. That means supplier details entry screen, and go for layout. It will be designing our own layout with our own tables. In previously, which we are having the SOP predefined of MK01, but here we are going to create our new one as per the user requirement, which it will be calling as a user defines, which we will be calling as a user defines. So in this user defines, which I have already created those of the fields and as well as the table, and for that table I am going to create the layout, how the fields will be. That means how the screen has to be comes into the user level, as like as an MK01. As like as an MK01. Let us see. Yeah. Go for SC38 and let's set the KP2. Change it. And now call screen of the 500. Yes. Already is there. Hello. Hello. Yeah. This is the screen will be showing like this. Now from here we have to go for the dictionary program fields window, and from the ZKP1 get from dictionary. In the KP1 we are having all these fields. One is the supplier ID and one is the supplier name, and another one is for the sub IDS code and as well as a content. Okay. So wherever you want to put, just put there, dictionary program fields window, and make it transfer. Automatically those things will be comes into here. And now make it save and come back, activate it and come back, and as well as come back. Now whatever we have done, the table was created for the client as per the client requirement of the vendor, and as well as per the client requirement we have created the screen also. And now we need to go for the creation of a transaction code for the user defined SC93, and I want the transaction code with the name of ZKPP. Create vendor data or else suppliers details entry. What is the program name? ZKP2 and the screen number 500. Now what the client is asked that they want to maintain one screen as like as an MK01, but not the MK01. Here it was comes with the MK01 for the vendor creation like that, but they want something new with their own requirement. Now we have done that one. Now being as a client, I am logging in, and now it will become as a user level. In the user level, simply we are giving ZKPP. Automatically that screen will become. And here the ABAPer can add the push buttons and as well as the some of the other buttons and everything. The ABAPer can add that, and they will make as like this: vendor, purchase organization, account to open, so on so on. So this is what we can call as an when before creation of the vendor, whatever the client is asking more than of the SAP predefined, then we can go for creation of a like this of the vendor or else the materials or something whatever. Yeah,